Jennifer Thompson is oh, sorry. Oh, we are going to start our meeting recording now. So I apologize for that. It popped up on my screen. So Jennifer Thompson is a records analyst and archivist in the institutional archives at the J. Paul Getty Trust, specializing in trust administration records and information management. Jennifer started with the department in 2004 as a staff assistant and has served in various administrative roles, records management, and archives roles. She holds a BA from the University of California, Santa Cruz in anthropology and South Asian studies, and an MA in international relations from San Francisco State University, and a Master of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. How exciting. Thank you so much for being here, Jennifer. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so should I start sharing?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, it says share. I need to request sharing.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Let's see. Here we go. Can we all see that? Yeah, okay. All right, let's get going. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer. Welcome to my presentation about institutional archives at the J. Paul Getty Trust. So my title is Records Analyst and Archivist, and Rena sort of went over all of this in my bio. I started at 2004. I was the admin assistant, did that for 2 years. I was promoted to records coordinator. That's the junior information and records management position in the department. A couple of years went by. The other staff who were the information management specialists, they left. So I moved into that role. And in 2008, I started my MLIS program at San Jose State. Graduated in 2015. I took it slow and easy. And in the meantime, in 2014, my job duties also started to include archives. So at that point, I became an archives records analyst. So the topics I'm going to present tonight are a little bit of our institutional history, our department, and how we decide which records we are going to archive. So on the left is Mr. John Paul Getty. He made his fortune in the oil business, and his company was called Getty Oil. He started collecting art in the late 1930s, and in 1953, he established the J. Paul Getty Museum as a nonprofit tax-exempt charitable trust to oversee his collections. And the original museum, you might be surprised to know, was actually opened in 1954 in a section of Mr. Getty's home, which you see in the middle image here. This is known as the Ranch House, and it's located in Pacific Palisades, just off of Pacific Coast Highway. And in the 1970s, the size of the collections and also the amount of museum visitors were becoming too large for the Ranch House. So this new museum, which you see on the right, in which we all know today as the Getty Villa, was built. And the Ranch House and the Getty Villa are on the same property. So Mr. Getty died in 1976, and he left the bulk of his estate, which at the time was about $700 million, to the museum. And then through a series of distributions and legal settlements, the endowment was valued at $2.3 billion in 1984. And the condition of having all of that money is that a specific amount had to be spent on a regular basis, specifically every 3 out of every 4 years, 4.5% of that endowment needs to be spent. So all of that money was how the Getty Center, as we know it today, got started. So in the early 80s, a series of institutes were created to complement the museum. You see these listed on the left. And then also there was an initiative to build the Getty Center in Brentwood. And on the right, that's the ridge where the center was built. And at this point, also, the J. Paul Getty Museum became legally known as the J. Paul Getty Trust because it encompassed not just the museum, but then, as I said, all of these programs. And that's the trust is kind of like the umbrella organization that is over it. And our department, Getty Institutional Archives, got its start in the early 2000s. And then now here we are almost 25 years later. So that's a little bit about our organization. And let's talk about what the Institutional Records and Archives Department is and what we do. So our department exists to collect and preserve the historical information of enduring value to the organization. And specifically, so our subject is the J. Paul Getty Trust, and our mission is to collect records and information that tell the story of the J. Paul Getty Trust. So a good way to think about that is to ask, so if somebody was writing a history of the Getty 50 years from now, what kind of materials would they want to be looking at to inform their research? So the materials that that researcher would want to access 50 years from now, those are the types of materials that we want to be putting into institutional archives today. And here's kind of an example of one of the records. This is actually, I really like this record. This is dated October 26, 1984. And it's a telegram from our then president, Harold M. Williams, to Richard Meyer, confirming that he will be the architect who is going to build the Brentwood Getty Center. So our department is administratively housed within the Getty Research Institute. The Research Institute is an art history library and an archives. So it contains things like vaults, it contains, all the supplies we need, the boxes and all of that, and sort of the administrative structure to run an archive. But we do serve and work across the entire organization in every single department on the Brentwood campus, which you see here, and also at the Getty Villa. So the department is organized on a liaison model. So each department member is pointed at a program, and that staff looks after the archival needs for that program. So this chart gives you a general idea of how the departments are broken down and assigned to staff. So, so I'm the trust liaison. So I'm responsible for all the records for Board of Trustees, for President's Office, Vice Presidents, and various departments performing administrative functions. And then other staff are assigned to the programs and the departments under that program. So for example, my colleague assigned to the museum is responsible for museum director's office, museum registrar, all of the art departments, and so on. So one really big advantage of this model is that we each become a specialist in each of our program's records because we only have to concentrate on them and their needs, and we figure out what they're all about and their specific history, their idiosyncrasies, and so we really gain a deep knowledge versus just having a very shallow and wide knowledge that all of us might have for the entire institution. So in that respect, it's a really good way to set up the department. So our primary mission is to collect anything that pertains to the institutional history of the Getty. And we generally describe this as being any documentation used or created by Getty staff that relates to the Getty's mission and core functions. And I'll get in more of the specifics about what those types of documents we collect are later in the presentation, but it does include documents, both physical and digital, that are created and used to run the organization and its business. This includes like strategic plans, correspondence, and project files, all sorts of things. And it also includes analog materials like photographs and recordings. So our job, we classify and appraise records and determine if they meet the standards for inclusion in institutional archives. So where do we find all these records? And I'm talking specifically physical records in this slide. So while obviously the best place is in offices and in file cabinets and desks and storage areas around the campus. I've even found records in closets and like in underground storage spaces, like all kinds of places. Like there's records swirled away everywhere. So most of the time, the staff will box up materials that they're ready to move out of their offices, and they'll send them to us for review. But sometimes we go into their offices and we work through materials with the staff in person so we can get like real-time information on what the records are. So this on the screen is an example of a project that I did in the communications department. And I reviewed and cleaned out all of the contents in that lateral file cabinet you see, and also a couple of desks. And yeah, just clean that all out, boxed it all up, and sent it off so that I could review it. And you can see that, yes, this is like the state that a lot of the materials were in. I'm sure maybe some of you have experience with receiving materials. And you can see there's also a bunch of non-paper materials like discs and some tapes in that other photo. So in addition to the keeping records in offices, we also offer a physical record storage facility, which we call our record center. And this is in-house in our warehouse. And everything we keep here has to be meet the requirements of our information management schedule, which I'm going to talk about shortly. So we find all of our digital records on our network shared drives. So this image is a highly organized and very neat network drive. It's really obvious what everything is. So that makes appraisal really easy, but unfortunately, we don't usually find shared drives in this state. So yeah, so we have to do some real kind of drilling down and looking around at what things are. So right now, our network appraisal drive is a manual process. But we are piloting an electronic records management system now, which once it's up and running, will gain a lot of information transparency across the entire Getty network. And that's going to enable us to disposition and collect records more efficiently for archives. So once we receive our materials and decide that we want them in institutional archives, we begin the process of making them accessible to users. So these images around the outside of the frame are all press kits and exhibition banners from the Press Relations and Public Outreach collection, which is that finding aid you see in the middle there. And this is one of my favorites collections. It just like has so much fun and colorful material, and it's fun to look at. So here's some more details about what happens when a collection comes to us. So once we receive it, the liaison will establish physical control over the materials by creating an accession record. And a session record is just an assemblage of basic information about the collection, such as its title, its extent, dates of the material, and the provenance, which is where the collection came from and who created it. And also, which is very important, is we assign, excuse me, let me turn this off, do that. Okay. Let's see, where was I? Assigning accession numbers. We assign the collection an accession number, which its unique ID, so that we can kind of send it off into our warehouse and we'll be able to track it down. So the accession numbers follows a format that includes the acquisition year and a number. And at the bottom right hand of the screen, you can see a box. It says 2021 IA 48. And this is the system that we use for our numbering. And that indicates the collection was obtained in the year 2021. And IA is Institutional Archives. And the 48 indicates that it was the 48th accession that our department made that year. So this is just a single box, so that's kind of the end of the accession number. But if there were multiple boxes, which is usually the case, we would just append that with a like -01, -02 to number all of the different boxes. So once that is all done, we can put it into storage and until further work is done on it. So just wanted to make a quick talk quickly about preservation. That happens sort of concurrently when we're accessioning, but it's also, super important because if we're going to put something into storage forever, we want to make sure it's in good shape before it goes up on that shelf. And it's especially important because once we put something up on a shelf, it might sit there for years and years until we can get back to it. So we want to know that it's safe and it's not, slowly decaying or anything like that. So basic actions that we take during appraisal, we remove plastic binders, folders with metal attachments, rubber bands that may become gross or they might already be gross, and rusting paper clips. We don't generally need any further, more in-depth preservation assistance. We never have any problems with, say, mold or anything like that. But we do have a conservation department available to us if we need that kind of assistance. So then, we transfer materials to our ASCII boxes and folders or containers appropriate to the media. And here on the left-hand side, those are architectural plans that are rolled up in Mylar and stored in these special cubbies. You see there's these 3 levels, and that's so we can store them safely without the rolls crushing, the weight of the rolls crushing down on each other. And here's some additional warehouse storage. Here you see one of our ranges. And on the right is a flat file storage. So after we've done all that, we set about to provide access. So the basic steps for that are determining the access rights. We process the collection, and then we catalog the collection record for access. So determining the access rights is a really important step because we need to know, if we're going to open the collection or if we have to close it, and if so, how many years do we close it for? So there's a variety of factors that goes into that decision, which is guided by this policy here. And we apply this equally and objectively to all collections. And many of the decisions we make have to do with protecting privacy and proprietary or sensitive information. So since we're a young institution, most of our records are currently restricted to use for staff only. Although things are starting to open up as we get older. Things from early 1980s are starting to become available. So as a general rule, Getty departments can review all the records that it or its antecedents created, and they may view other departments' records if they have permission from that department. The only exception to that is general counsel, the president's office, and the board of trustees can look at any records anytime, and they don't have to tell the department that they're looking at them, but that never happens. So anyways, we have these 5 different tiers. So the first tier is permanently closed. The second tier is closed for 50 years after the date of the last accession. And that will include records of officers and directors. The third tier is closed for 35 years after the latest inclusive accession date, and that will include information about art objects. And the fourth tier is closed for 25 years after the latest inclusive accession, and that's basically everything else that weren't in those categories I mentioned. And then the fifth tier are records that were intentionally made for public circulation. So they're open immediately to anyone who wants to look at them. So in addition to determinations made by archive staff and that are in the access policy, we may need to work with donors. We don't often do that, but occasionally we do have some donors, and they may choose to put additional restrictions on a collection. And an example of that is we do have an oral history program with former officers and directors and persons important to the institution. We'll give interviews, and those participants can choose to close their transcripts and recordings for a period of time, like 10 years, 15 years, whatever, or they may choose to have it sealed until their death. So next is to process a collection. So processing is a term with a very archive-specific definition, as I'm sure you all know, meaning to arrange the records, either physically, intellectually, or both, and to create a descriptive inventory of the collection. And this document is called a finding aid, provides an overview of the collection and tells the researcher what's in it. So we create our finding aids in archive space, which you see here on the left, and then the resulting product that output from that is this finding aid you see on the right. So one important thing to note with institutional archives finding aids is that they pretty much all contain multiple accessions. And that is because we want to co-locate discrete collections that are created by a department over time. So what does that mean? So this finding aid is for Getty press releases and public outreach materials. So issuing PR materials is something that is like never going to stop as long as the Getty exists. So there's going to constantly be material. And we've set up a schedule with them that they will transfer all of the material for a year to us at the end of a calendar year. So we just collect their material on a year-by-year basis. And we want to keep all of that material inventory together for ease of use. So everything that's, every press kit that's ever existed, you can look in this finding aid and find it. And I know that many other repositories, especially special collections repositories, might not do that. They might just say, okay, we received this collection, we're going to process it, that's it. Like we're done working on it, it's done, that's it. It's just this one thing. But we can, have many accessions in one collection. So this is just a finding aid table of contents. It gives you an idea of the type of information that we provide with our researchers. And at the bottom half of the screenshot is the actual inventory. And if you recall, I mentioned intellectual arrangement a couple slides back, and this is an example of that. Because all of these different types of material might be distributed like all over the collection. But we want to say, okay, here's every press release, here's every press kit, here's, every event calendar, and just provide a comprehensive listing for that. And finally, once we've done all that, we can catalog the collection record for access so that any researcher could easily find it. But this is important to note, we only catalog collections that are open. So yeah, the bulk of our collections, as I said, are not open for research yet. So this is just a small subset. It goes up in these public portals. So after we create the catalog record, we submit it to these various different entities disseminating the information. And then anyone with a search tool can find it. And hopefully they'll say, oh, that's interesting. I think I want to look at that. And they'll contact us and we'll provide them with that material. So that is like one of the main activities of our job, but there's a couple more aspects I just wanted to discuss. So we're responsible for creating all kinds of documentation. We create our own policies, such as access, and then we have an information governance policy and a information management schedule that you see here, which I'm going to talk about that schedule in a minute. And we also create manuals, both for ourselves and for training manuals for our users in the departments in the Getty community. We maintain and publish various guides. They're sort of like self-service if people just want to, embark on some kind of records organization project on their own. They have that resource available to them. And we also maintain information on the Getty intranet. So again, anybody can just go and access that whenever they want. We also, the way we work, we have formal and informal strategies for how we go about what we're doing. So formally, we have all these official policies, and these are reviewed and approved by general counsel. So we have that relationship that sort of is like, okay, here's our policy, you approved it. So now we can go ahead and enforce it. But informally, and I think most usefully, is we build and maintain relationships with our department colleagues. And then once we've been working with a program for a while, we really begin to understand how the department operates, what their needs are, the type of records they generate. And then also along with that, this sustained and regular contact, we really build a degree of trust with the department members about what our job is as archivists and what we would like to collaborate with them on. So that transferring records just becomes a really regularized activity like anything else that they would do in the course of their job. And finally, we love to share our knowledge of the organization across the trust with professional colleagues and the public, just like in this meeting right now. So how do we find records that we want to keep in institutional archives? So the Getty has about 1,200 employees that are distributed both at the Brentwood Center and at the Villa in Pacific Palisades. So that's a lot of office space and a lot of network storage. And, people love to generate paperwork and digital documents. So how do we cut through all that and figure out what we need to be looking at? So we start by collaborating with the departments to apply our records and information policy to their records while those records are still in the custody of the department. So this upfront work is really, really key to success because we want to engage with staff about what's important and to help them identify and then eventually transfer materials to the archives before, their records get old or they're forgotten about, or, the person who created them just like left, or, someone shoves them in a drawer, or, they get thrown away or deleted or whatever. We want to prevent that from happening. So we offer a lot of different collaborative opportunities. We do a lot of informal one-on-one meetups. And in particular, I really like to kind of dial down the sort of office, being in an office, and maybe go in a more relaxed setting like at the coffee cart or take a walk around campus. Or we can also hold more formal department meetings and trainings. We hold dedicated records cleanup days in departments where all staff will dedicate a period of time or a day or whatever, and everyone in the department will focus on cleaning up their records. Or, as I mentioned before in my other slide, we have these guides online and people can just, do it themselves, download those guides and, be off and running on their own. So we'll really try and do just about anything and try anything to encourage staff to become engaged with their records and engage with us. So when we're looking for the records that we want for archives, we start with these questions: the who, what, when, where, and how. If a record answers any of those questions, then we say, okay, we need to like dial in and take a closer look at this. So we use those questions in conjunction with our information management schedule, which to determine what we want to collect for archives and what we can destroy and what we don't care about. So we're not the only ones who use this schedule. It's also for all Getty staff. Is free to consult this and figure out what their records are. So this document, it outlines all of the categories of information at Getty. It says the lengths of time that information should be kept, and then it says what the disposition action once a retention period has been met. And then the disposition action is either, okay, this can just be destroyed, we don't care about it, or it's going to move over to archives. And we make two distinctions with that. We have an archival review category, meaning we want to look at it and make an appraisal decision, or just straight, okay, we know we want that, send it over to archives. And this is our most recently updated schedule as of January 2025. The schedule is updated and approved by General Counsel every 2 years. And these drawings on here are from our collections. So the Getty Information Management Schedule. So information is categorized under these 21 categories here according to function, and it's not by department name. So, for example, the museum has a registrar and the research institute has a registrar, and they both have collections acquisitions material. Like the museum is art objects and the library registrar are like archival collections. So they can both use all the collection acquisitions and the collection management. But we do have a couple of series on here that are the names of the departments, but they're not just for those departments. So there's like human resources, there's publications, and there's security. So yeah, you're under HR, you're going to find a lot of records that maybe only HR is going to have. But also, if you're some other department and you have anything that meets the descriptions of those records, then you're free to use that category as well. So delving into these categories and subcategories a little more. So this is what the entry looks like. So you see that name at the top, that category name. This is collection acquisitions. And then that's followed by the 3 subcategories there, which are breaking it down more discreetly what we expect to see in the collections acquisitions category. These are all the activities of collections acquisitions. So you see there's a brief description, and we assign each subcategory a record code for sort of a shorthand to describe it. And then you'll see they each are assigned a retention period and a disposition action. And this particular one, collection acquisitions, you just see permanent. And that's that's analogous to archives. That's, we're going to keep that forever. But you see retention period and disposition, that has sort of that CY plus 10 years arc rev. And I'll get into a little more what that means. So here are some more categories with the subcategory, and I snipped all of these. Each of these has a lot more in them. This was just the one that was at the very top, so I just snipped it so they would all fit on the slide here. So you see each has a title, they have a code, they have the description, and the retention and disposition instructions. So all of these have what's called a closed date retention period, that's CL, meaning that the records are kept in the department's custody for a certain number of years after a triggering event, and then the records are no longer needed on a day-to-day basis, and that's sort of the +6 or the +10 that you see here, that they might keep them in their offices. And then after that comes this decision like, okay, you're going to send it to archives and we are going to review it, or whatever that disposition action is. So these triggering events, that's basically whenever the process is that you're describing is over. So say for audits, that trigger event would be when the audit is finished. For exhibitions, it would be when all activities surrounding that exhibition had been concluded, which doesn't necessarily mean when the exhibition closed. It, because loaned artworks might need to be returned to their owners, or something like that. So the closure horizon can be beyond the main event there. And so that's what we're trying to capture here, is how long departments are going to need to hold on to their records for business. So as I said, we do have some categories where we know that we want to have the records. An example of this is Board of Trustees meeting minutes. Those come directly to us. We don't even have to look at them because we know, oh yeah, we want those. And then there are also a lot of records that we just don't even want in archives, like payroll records or personnel files. And departments don't necessarily, they don't want those either. So after a certain amount of time, we say, okay, you don't need these anymore. You can safely destroy them because they've met their retention period. And then this is where the materials, I should say the physical materials, go once the decision has been made. So on the left are boxes that are being staged for shred. You can see they say shred on them, and inside we just throw everything. We don't care if it's, at this point we don't have to keep anything organized, or it's this department, that department. No, we just throw it all in here. And on the right are rehouse materials that are in the archives. So it can go either or. This is like the final stock right here. And if we're going to be talking about electronic materials, that is that's obviously a whole different process from this paper-based workflow here. But once we have our electronic records management system up and running, we will be able to identify and process disposition, which means then we will be able to destroy records, or we will be able to port those records over to our digital preservation system. We use Rosetta at the Getty. And then in Rosetta, those records can be made accessible to users through our library catalog, which is Primo. So, and with that, so I hope that was informative. I know it was a lot of information, but there's a lot to say about what we do. Hope you learned something new about Getty's Institutional Records and Archives. And I want to thank you very much for inviting me to speak tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. I learned so much from your presentation. I was not aware of that process whatsoever, so I really appreciated your well thought out description. It was fun to also kind of get insight into how you all work together behind the scenes at the Getty, trying to engage with the archives and with each other, just further developing that camaraderie. I really valued that as well. So for this next portion, it's for all our participants for you to get your questions out there. I'm going to pass the torch over to my fellow SAASC member, Chris Reynolds, and she will be announcing the questions, and then we'll pivot back to me. I'm going to give some announcements on upcoming events that I'm really excited about for you to keep an eye out. And also, we'll hear from Marlene, our chair, who's going to let you know where we can find the info from today's session. So thank you, Chris.
All right, so it looks like we've got some questions already lining up. Let's start with Carol, who has her hand raised. If you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hey there.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for doing this presentation. It was really interesting. I have two questions for you that immediately came to mind. First, was the Getty able to pay for your MMS degree? And
Yeah.
second, they were?
Yes.
That's fantastic. Second, the Getty Archives department seems to be quite comprehensive. And I'm wondering, how common is that at museums? I used to work at in museums, and I know they're always strapped for cash. I'm wondering, like, does LACMA also have a very comprehensive department? Does the Natural History Museum? Just curious.
I believe that they have some sort of program, but then, how developed it is, that's sort of a matter of obviously what the resources they have and how much staff they have. But museum archives section exists for museum archives. So we've been approached by several organizations about how to start an institutional archives in a museum. So it's definitely, it's not sources.
Sorry, it's like I'm having problems with my internet. I'm just gonna have to wait for the recording to to listen to your complete answer. The recording will be made available later, right?
Yeah, so we are going to announce where the recording can be made available. So, and thank you for your question, Carol. If you could go ahead and shut your video off just so we can try to streamline through these questions. I think
Thank you.
because the internet is a little bit spotty, we're just going to go ahead and read everyone's questions from the chat just so we can try to keep the ball rolling and try to get to everybody.
All right. So the first question from the chat is, do you fulfill reference requests? And does this reference happen based on the liaison model as well?
So yes, and there's sort of two routes we take with reference requests. And again, this is based on where it's coming from. We have internal department requests, and then there are outside researcher requests. The internal requests, they will come into us directly. We have a department, an alias email where departments can send us requests, or increasingly, as we work with people, they know who we are. They'll just contact us directly. And then they'll tell us what they need. Sometimes they know exactly what they need. Sometimes we need to hunt for them, and we'll just go ahead and fulfill that for them. And they will come over to, we work in a suite, an office suite, that has sort of an open area in the middle of all our offices. And department staff will just come directly to our suite and, consult the materials right there. It's a little different if it is an outside researcher. Generally, those requests will come to us from the GRI reference desk. And generally, the researcher will have located whatever they want to look at online in the library catalog. And through that, there's a procedure where they can make a request for the materials. That's what ends up at the reference desk, and then the reference desk will contact us. And then depending on sort of what area it's from, like museum or trust or whatever. Like I would take it if it was trust related, or if it was museum, my colleague would take it. And then we would just fulfill that request and sort of hand off the materials to the reading room. And all the outside researchers, they go directly to the reading room. They don't come into our suite. So that's the distinction with that.
Very cool. That makes a lot of sense that there would be two different ways to do that. Let's see. Next up, we have Abby asked, I'm curious to learn more about Rosetta. Is there an online training we could do, perhaps? Or like, is there a way that outsiders might be able to learn a little bit more about that system?
I am unfortunately not our Rosetta expert. I just sort of know the bare bones to do the job. But I'm sure that, a lot of the archives community is just very open source. So I'm sure that there are resources. Um, and I'm sure like at SAA, I'm sure you could find a ton of resources. I'm sure there's a, Rosetta working group. I haven't looked lately at what there is, but yeah, I'm sure it'd be super easy to get connected.
Cool. All right. Next up is the Getty system a widely adopted system, or do different collections have their own systems? Are there any more that are like a little bit more universal? I guess the question is.
I would say the institutional archives model is definitely a widely adopted way of doing archives. A lot of businesses have them. In fact, there's like, NARA, that's an institutional archive. So yeah, and I know that like there's not only just nonprofits and museums like the Getty, but also companies have archives. For example, Disney has this crazy interesting archive of all kinds of things. And, they mine that for all kinds of reasons, like commercial and also research, which, we don't do. Everything we do is nonprofit. But yeah, institutional archives are definitely a normalized. I'm sorry if that was your question.
I'm sure we'll see if it was a little bit of a different variation down the line. Next up, can you talk about professional organizations and what kind of support they provide? So I'm guessing maybe that's like if you guys get any support from SAA or the, what is it? I always get it confused. It's like NDCC, yeah.
Mhm. Um, Yeah, we might from time to time have collaborations with them, but Getty is pretty self-sufficient in terms of resources. And in fact, through the Getty Foundation, Getty is often the one that's giving other people money. So, but no, we do collaborate like all across the organization. I mean, not just in archives, but there's all kinds of collaboration going on.
Nice. Okay, let's see here. Oh, we've got 10 minutes left. Rena, did you need to wrap things up or
I
one more?
did. I did want to try to get to everybody. There was one question that I was curious about myself. And that let's try to end with that one. And how did the Palisades fire affect the work that you did?
Well, we didn't go to work
What
for a
time
week.
did it change? Did it sort of get the ball rolling with emergency preparedness or changes to the protocols moving forward?
Well, for us personally, as a department, it prompted discussion about how we might want to set up some kind of transfer mechanism for department staff to submit their own photos and their own, whatever materials they wanted to about the files. And this is kind of like a completely new model. Then it's, creating an artificial collection, really. It's not based on transferring materials, but we thought that, hey, that would be pretty cool if we could collect people's photos. So yeah, that's how it affected us specifically. But yeah, otherwise, people down at the villa, they still aren't going down there to work, but there was no time where any of our records or archives in danger.
That's good to know, and I appreciate that. So there were a couple other questions, and I'm curious, Jennifer, are you open to me emailing you some of these questions? They're more along the lines of possible classes or volunteer opportunities or suggestions or experiences that you had in the past. I can give you a little overview so we can give them to our participants when we
Oh,
send the YouTube
mhm.
link. Are you open to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Great. Just to honor our 7 p.m. hard stop time. And we just really appreciated you being here on behalf of SAASC. I do want to give a shout out for some upcoming events. So we have Christy Martin from the Archives at Walt Disney, Julie Johnson from the National Park Service Preservation, a speaker from the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. We have Jen Dentel from Gerber Hart, who presents on queer history and archives. So we have some really exciting stuff coming up for you still in the spring semester. And uh, also, keep an eye out because if you want to be a part of SAASC, which is a wonderful experience and opportunity, we are going to be holding elections soon. So definitely keep an eye out for more updates on that. And thank you all for being here, for participating, and for your questions. And Jennifer, thank you so much. It was just such a well thought out presentation. I learned a lot, and we're just in gratitude that you took the time to share with us. So
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you, and good luck to everyone in your studies.
Thank you. So, Marlene, did you want to go ahead and give that last little clip on where everyone can find the info?
Yeah, so we're gonna upload the video to our YouTube, and you'll all get an email with the recording link, everyone who registered for the event, and then we'll also include the questions that weren't answered that Rena will send to Jennifer.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. Good luck with classes, and have a beautiful rest of your week, and happy equinox. So, have a wonderful night.